Hands up any Ontario Conservative who thinks that Tim Hudak's energy plan is a promise that Ontario citizens can trust this October 6th on Election Day. Speaking as a Conservative, I have real concerns about his plan. Ontario's Progressive Conservative Party needs a real energy plan. Recapping, here is the plan as reflected in the party's platform document, Changebook, and Mr. Hudak's major policy pronouncements on the subject over the last 10 months. As it addresses energy, Changebook could be renamed Shell Game Book. That children's game where you hide the pea under a bunch of moving shells? Changebook promises to get, quote, home energy bills under control, end quote. How? Mr. Hudak will remove the HST from home hydro and heating fuel bills. This will only result in shifting that tax burden to others or to the province's deficit. Some ratepayer groups will get lower rates, but all that relief will be at the expense of others. There's one shell game. Shell games like this pollute Ontario's energy history. Look, for example, at Premier McGuinty's hopelessly empty-minded Ontario Clean Energy Benefit. There's a real shell game. He cuts 10% from household power bills and tax it onto the deficit for our kids to pay. Some folks support shifting power costs to the deficit, but they tend to be Liberal voters. Changebook promises to remove the debt retirement charge from home hydro bills. The public accounts of Ontario do not make perfectly clear where all the revenue from the debt retirement charge has been going over the years. But one part that is perfectly clear in the public accounts, that is that the citizens of Ontario owe over $14 billion associated with the liabilities of the old Ontario Hydro. Until that debt is all paid down, it would be simply irresponsible to transfer the costs of the debt retirement obligation from some customers to others, whether in the form of higher rates for others or an extended period for recovering the debt retirement charge. That's a burden that should be shared by everybody, not a shell game that should be shifted around. Voters should ask what conservative principles guided the party in promising these shell games with public finances. As we look in horror at the damage of deficit financing in places like Greece and the United States, we should ask ourselves, why would we want to do something like that with our own power system? Mr. Hudak, in his Changebook, promises to eliminate the Ontario Power Authority, a major provincial government electricity bureaucracy. The grounds for this removal? The Changebook tells us that the Ontario Power Authority has, quote, burned through $300 million in 6 years, end quote. Hang on a second. All of the Ontario Power Authority's spending has been approved by the Ontario Energy Board. In a major speech last October to the energy industry, Mr. Hudak committed to strengthen the Ontario Energy Board. Finally, I thought, that's a politician who's taking a concrete step in the right direction. I was completely sucked in. You don't strengthen an agency by abrogating its decisions. Mr. Hudak's commitment to strong, independent public utility regulation is obviously something that he is not prepared to stick with. The truth is that the Ontario Power Authority has been doing what it's been told to do by the McGuinty government. There are a lot of good people at the Ontario Power Authority with much needed and highly specialized technical skills. Some experts at the Power Authority have excellent job prospects at comparable compensation levels. We need those skills right now to figure out how to operate the new, vastly more complex power system Mr. McGuinty has unwittingly created. Ontario needs a restructuring plan for the electricity sector before we start ripping up agencies. If the Ontario Power Authority were to be ripped up, its major functions would simply have to be transferred to other agencies within the power system. Tearing up the Ontario Power Authority now would be an institutional shell game. The platform document, Changebook, says that Conservatives will, quote, unplug the smart meters and refers to them as tax machines. I hope everyone understands that in this context, the term unplugged is used only metaphorically. Literally, unplugging your meter would be risky, illegal, and leave you in the dark. The smart meter is not more of a tax machine than the meter it replaces. Cutting through the careless rhetoric, what the Conservative platform intends to say is that households will have a choice between flat rates or time of use rates. Reverting back from time of use back to flat rates would be another shell game, only worse because it's less than a zero-sum game economically. But neither time of use nor flat rates will help us maximize efficiency. Consumers in Ontario have invested in the order of $2 billion in the smart metering program. These devices are vastly more capable than the meters that they've replaced. Stranding the smart meter investment is a losing strategy. With the smart meter investment already sunk, we should be moving to utilize their real capabilities to aid conservation and enhance power system reliability by transitioning in the direction of real-time pricing. Implementing a smart meter, a smarter pricing system that can earn the public's acceptance will require consultation, creativity, and fair dealing. The only element of the current Conservatives' commitment to Ontario voters that stands on some logical foundation is the commitment to kill the McGuinty government's feed-in tariff program. The feed-in tariff program is anti-competitive, absurdly inefficient, corrosive of community harmony in regions hosting unwelcome wind power developments, and outrageously contemptuous of consumers. The feed-in tariff program has made Ontario an international magnet for carpetbaggers seeking to jump on the gravy train while McGuinty is still pouring the ratepayers' champagne. Just as one example, the feed-in tariff program's irresponsible waste. Quebec is buying wind power from wind farms at a rate of around 8.7 cents per kilowatt hour in competitive processes, whereas the non-competitive feed-in tariff program in Ontario is buying that same power at 13.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Mr. McGuinty is sticking to his buying spree, even while Ontario is spilling massive amounts of surplus generation. Even if Mr. McGuinty wins in October, the feed-in tariff program in its current form is toast. Mr. Hudak is right to promise to kill the feed-in tariff program, but what will he replace it with? The only clue Mr. Hudak provides is in the sentence, quote, "We will invest in an affordable, clean energy mix, gas, hydro, and nuclear." End quote. So who is this we? Throughout Changebook, it says, we will cut the HST, we will give you relief from the debt reduction charge. Clearly, we, in the context of Changebook, refers to the new Ontario government after the election. Mr. Hudak obviously favors forcing Ontario taxpayers to become involuntary investors in Crown gas, hydro, and nuclear plant enterprises. Mr. Hudak could have said that there will be an independent public review to figure out what assets we need to best serve consumers. He could have said that Conservatives favor competitive auctions to buy the power that we do need at the lowest overall combination of cost and risk. But no, he didn't say those things. Instead, he committed to a massive renationalization of the power sector. Anybody who wants a more nationalized electricity sector already has the option to vote for the NDP, who've made that promise themselves. Again, what conservative principles guided the party to commit to renationalization of the power sector? Mr. McGuinty's electricity legacy includes unprecedented rate increases and politicization of decision-making within the power sector, growing conflict in rural areas hosting wind power development, massive impacts on taxpayers and the deficit, a continuation of excessive compensation throughout the ranks of the power sector, and a demoralized group of public agencies. In some cases, his power reforms have been guided by out-and-out dishonesty, like the claim that wind power is replacing coal power. In fact, during the heat wave of July 2011, coal power was replacing wind power. In other cases, Mr. McGuinty has flip-flopped so much that he keeps contradicting himself. In 2003, he campaigned to maintain the taxpayer subsidies to power rates that were introduced by arguably Ontario's worst conservative premier ever, Premier Eves. Then, in 2004, Mr. McGuinty took a new line saying that ratepayers had to pay the full cost of electricity for both conservation and to get the deficit under control. Only wingnuts opposed him with that rate increase. It was a responsible decision to take. Now, caught by surprise by the cost of his green energy commitments, he has reverted to the Eves deficit financing model. In energy, you can only believe Mr. McGuinty's actions, not his words. Voters concerned about the relentless double-digit rate increases year after year, or other damaging developments within Ontario's power system, will be looking to the Progressive Conservative Party come election time. Many people, even some with concerns about Mr. McGuinty's electricity policies, will think twice about voting for a Progressive Conservative energy shell game. Ontario's Conservatives may win the election in October despite the obvious lack of care and thought on the subject of energy policy as reflected in its shell game book. If you think Ontario Conservatives need some better ideas for what to do starting the day after the election, I invite you to join the debate at www.tomadamsenergy.com.